Hey, technostads! There's times when an incident response plan just isn't enough, and we need to kick in a disaster recovery plan. So in this video, let's talk about disaster recovery, what it is, and what a disaster recovery plan is. In this video, we'll start out by talking about what disaster recovery is, also known as DR. We'll get into disaster recovery versus what is incident response. We'll talk about disasters and some of the disasters that could cause a problem, and then the effects of that. And then we'll get into what a DR plan should cover. We'll talk about capacity planning, get into platform diversity and the importance of platform diversity, and then we'll wrap things up talking about testing. Disaster recovery is when we have to recover from something catastrophic. Perhaps we have a total system meltdown and failure and we have to replace those servers. Or maybe our data becomes corrupt, or maybe we are missing data and we have to do a full data restore. Perhaps our whole data center went offline and we need to failover to a hot, warm, or cold site. It can be confusing when we start talking about incident response plan, disaster recovery plans, contingency plans, business continuity plans. What is the difference between all of these? Well, an incident response plan is when we're responding to an incident. Somebody has reported that there's some sort of service down or there's something going on the network. We need to start figuring out what's going on, how come our users are complaining about this, and start developing a plan to fix that. How are we going to respond when there's an incident? We may need to take that a step further. If it's a disaster and we've got a complete system meltdown, what is the steps that we're going to follow, the processes that we're going to follow to get back up and running? And so these two really have to mainly do with IT systems. So this is IT issues. This is when the whole system goes down. How can we recover from those system failures? A contingency plan and a business continuity plan is a bigger in scope in that it's talking about business operations. How are we going to come up with solutions when there is business operations that are interrupted? And so not just IT solutions, not just technical solutions. So a good example is for a contingency plan. We may have a contingency plan for when there's a pandemic and everybody has to start working from home. Then we have a contingency plan for that kicks in and helps us be able to solve for that particular issue. A business continuity plan is even broader in scope, where it's just what are we trying to accomplish, how are we going to accomplish it, and it probably has some contingency plans built into it. So there's specific contingency plans that would get built into this business continuity plan. Disaster recovery usually starts out as some sort of incident response. That is, you have some sort of incident that occurs. You receive notification that the system is down, it's not responding well, that there's performance issues, perhaps some data has become corrupt. Something has happened where it triggers an incident response. You start the incident response procedures and trying to figure out and troubleshoot what's going on and fix the issue. At some point in time, you may figure that there is a total system meltdown, that this is a disaster, and now we need to pull out our disaster recovery plan to fail over to another site or do a full system restore. So at that point in time, disaster recovery kicks in and you start following those procedures to get back up and running again. Disasters could include things like a fire in the data center, which causes physical damage. It could be something like an earthquake, or even around here, we've got to be concerned about volcanoes. It could be something like cyber crime, if we're being hacked, or maybe some sort of utility disruption. It really has less to do with what has caused the issue, but more of the effects. So is our servers gone down and we need to completely replace the servers that we have? Or has our data become corrupt? So it really has to deal with doing maybe some sort of full system restore or replacing our hardware. So then the question is, well, what should the plan cover? And the answer to that is really it's our people, processes, and technology. We need to make sure that we are thinking about our technology, our processes, and our people when it comes to disaster recovery. When it comes to people, we got to start thinking about who's going to be responsible and what they're responsible for. What are the different roles in disaster recovery? Like, Who's going to call that there is a disaster and we need to recover from this? Who's going to manage all of the communication that's going to happen? Who's going to coordinate everything? So we need to think about all of the roles and the responsibility of those roles. We also think about the process. What tasks are we going to follow? What documentation do we have to do this failover or to do this restore or to do the recovery from this disaster? Then we can also think about the technologies. What servers are we going to use? What facilities? Do we have some sort of failover site? Are there alternate sites? What are the supporting technologies that are associated with our services? And for each of these, we also have to think about the capacity of each of these. For instance, our failover sites might not have this full capacity that our regular sites have. And so a lot of times we do that as a failover, as a last resort, but they don't have all of the equipment and hardware needed to be fully functioning. And so we have to think about, well, what is the capacity of that? What are the capacity of the people? What if we have an earthquake and we're all recovering personally from this earthquake and also need to get our data centers up and running as well? That could be problematic. So we need to include all of the capacity part of it as part of our planning. We also should think about platform diversity. And that is, maybe we have everything in our AWS cloud. And maybe the original site is in the region of Oregon and the other one is in the Virginia region. And so we've got this distributed properly from a regional standpoint. But what happens is a lot of services, even in Oregon, are hinged off of AWS's Virginia services. So if they have some downtime with Virginia services, it could affect some of the services that are in the Oregon site. And so do we want to put some of it here in the AWS cloud and some maybe in the Google or Azure cloud to distribute amongst different platforms? Of course, any good plan needs to be tested because there could be certain flaws in your plan. Flaws that cause some sort of delay in actually implementing your disaster recovery and actually failing over the site or whatever it is that you're doing. But the other flip side of this is there could be missing components, missing data, missing documentation, missing parts of this that if you don't think and test this ahead of time, failover might not even be a possibility. So there are different ways that we can actually go through testing. And depending on what we do, then it will have different ramifications. For instance, ideally, we'd actually go through a full live failover. We're actually failing over to another data center where our customers are now actually all on the new equipment, that everything is now up and running. This is a full disaster recovery test, and that's the most ideal, but it can be very disruptive. So there's other things that we can actually implement that doesn't require us to do a full failover. And that is maybe something like a tabletop exercise. A tabletop exercise is a very basic one. That is just we all get around the table and we start talking about the plan and work through step by step the plan and see what needs to be updated with it. This is the fastest and easiest, but it is the least comprehensive and it's really not going to test a whole lot out. It's just going to make sure our documents are updated. Then you have a simulated, where you're actually going to go through the steps of simulating a failover. It's not going to be a full failover, but you're just simulating that. And then you can identify more than you would with just a tabletop. Since we don't want to really affect production, we could do a failover test on a non-production system. So a lot of times you'll have a smaller dev environment and then you have a production environment. So this is the production environment right here. And it could be pretty devastating if you get something wrong. So let's try this out on a dev environment or some sort of practice environment. So you can test this out on a non-production system. There's also this parallel processing. Maybe you want to test it out on your production system, but you don't want to necessarily put all of your eggs in one basket. You don't want to fail over all your customers. So you do some sort of parallel processing where you stand up a duplicate environment that you can test. Perhaps you even fail some customers over to this duplicate environment and you have some sort of parallel processing. Or perhaps that's just the way you do business. And a lot of people will do this A/B testing where they have 80% of the customers go to one environment and 20% to the other environment. And then if something were to ever happen, they could fail over to that other environment. In this video, we went over that disaster recovery, the DR plan. We talked about disaster recovery versus other things like incident response plans. We talked about disasters, what some of the disasters could have, and really it's about the effect. With your servers and your services, if they go down and we need to do something very drastic to get them back up and running again, we've now gone into a disaster recovery. We talked about what DR plan should cover. We talked about capacity planning to make sure that whatever it is that you're failing over to, we have the capacity to take on our customers. We talked about platform diversity and maybe what we want to do is actually go across different vendors. We talked about also with testing and some things that you could do, different steps you could do for testing.